Welcome to Mental Health in the Time of Coronavirus, your computer-side chat with the experts. Today we will discuss, are we living in a pathological society? I am Bandy Lee, president of the World Mental Health Coalition, a professional organization that focuses on having healthy leadership so that we can help promote societal mental health. We have two special speakers this evening, both beloved contributors to the dangerous case of Donald Trump. First is Elizabeth Mika, who received her degree in clinical psychology from the Mickiewicz University of Poland. At Gifted Resources near Chicago, she specializes in the assessment and counseling of gifted children and adults, as well as emotional and moral development. Next is Ian Hughes, a physicist who also trained at the Irish Institute for Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy. He is a senior research fellow at the Environmental Research Institute at University College Cork, and is author of Disordered Minds, which explores how dangerous personalities are responsible for much of the world's violence.
So the topic of our conversation is, are we living in a pathological society? And I thought this is a question with such an obvious answer, right? That it's strange that it must be asked, but I suppose it must. We have lived in a pathological society well before Trump was elected to presidency. And so what I think we are seeing is exacerbation of that pathological reality through this presidency. And it's not accidental. I think it was necessary. What worries me quite a bit is seeing the calls for a return to the so-called normal that I see, and I understand that. However, the normal is what brought us Trump in the first place. So there's no return to that normal anymore because our reality will be altered by these events that are developing around us. But also it would not be something to desire to begin with. So the normal is what gave us 150,000 deaths of despair. That's a number of people who died in 2017 due to alcohol, drug, and suicide, alcohol, drug abuse, and suicide. And 45,000 people in America, roughly, so those are all statistics, die because they have no access to healthcare. There are thousands of people who die in mass shootings. This is not normal. It has not been normal for a very long time. So the answer to the question that's the theme of our conversation is a resounding yes. A society where there is no universal healthcare is not a healthy society. I mean, this is such a basic statement that it's stunning that we need to be reminded of it and that we need to agitate for it, and without success so far. But that's an excellent example of what a healthy society would allow people to have: universal healthcare, access to free, excellent education on all levels, living wages that allow people to work and have free time for reflection, for creative pursuits, for development. When people have to work 3 or 4 jobs, just to make ends meet, that's not a healthy society. We are robbing people of the right to develop. And that goes back to my definition of mental health, by the way. As I was reflecting in preparation for our conversation on what mental health is, and what normalcy is, Normalcy is not just the absence of pathological symptoms, and that's not what mental health is. Mental health is ability to develop, not just the absence of so-called pathological symptoms. In fact, sometimes so-called pathological symptoms are a sign of mental health. So symptoms of anxiety, depression, inner doubts, inner conflicts are actually symptoms of mental health. Because they allow us to positively disintegrate and growth. Positive disintegration is necessary for growth. And positive disintegration is also what we are seeing on a large scale in our society now. So again, it's kind of a double-edged sword. We are seeing the sign of this disorder that's enveloping our nation and the world. But in that disorder, there are seeds of growth and development, of positive development.
Thank you very much. Next is Ian Hughes. Ian, would you like to begin?
Thank you, Bandy, and thank you, Elizabeth. It's a privilege to be here with both of you. You're both people I admire enormously for your courage and your courage to speaking truth to pathological power. So I agree absolutely with what Elizabeth has just said in terms of a return to normal isn't really what we want to happen. I'm going to try and explore the idea of what a pathological society is on 3 different levels, to try and answer it in 3 different ways. So the first is to say, in terms of, to my mind, and which is a hugely hopeful thing, I think, is that a pathological society compared to a healthy society is one that is based on values and that has a normative basis. And a normative basis that is actually very fundamentally grounded in the science that we know. So for example, to explain what I mean, we are living creatures, and so we want to grow. The very first thing we want to do is to grow and to flourish, to learn, to grow in love with our parents, with our partners, with our families, to find things that interest us, to go towards where our passions are. Right? And I think a healthy society is a society that enables that to happen. A pathological society is a society that has norms and values that prevent large sections of the society from doing that. So when we look currently at the US, for example, but not only, because if we look at pathological societies throughout history, you see that the values that have dominated are values of cruelty, of greed, of inequality, of paranoia, of scapegoating others. So there are values that are very much ones that stop us from flourishing, both as individuals and as communities. And when I say that this is grounded in science, I'm referring, of course, to neuroscience, which shows that in our very early days as infants, the environment that we absolutely need in order for brain development is one of love and fun. So it's almost a definition of the human species, which is a wonderfully uplifting one, to think that we are a species that is fundamentally designed to flourish in environments of love and fun. That's the societies we should be trying to create, because that's the societies in which most of us, all of us will flourish. So on one level, that's a definition of a pathological society. On a second level is the idea that certain individuals, due to failures in early development, end up with what we call dangerous personality disorders. And we can talk about narcissistic personality disorder, paranoid personality disorder, malignant narcissism. We hear these terms being talked about. What they really mean is that certain individuals become frozen at very early stages of psychological and moral development. And it means that they are psychologically incapable of creating those environments in which society and individuals can flourish. And we know quite a bit about what the conditions that allow individuals with these disorders to come to power. So we talk about the toxic triangle, where you have a toxic individual, but in order for that individual to come to power, they need a core base of followers who either think the same as them, share their disorder, or else, because of the circumstances, they come to believe that the solutions that the toxic individual is selling are actually the solutions that they want to be put in place. So at that second level, there's an understanding of pathological society as one in which dangerous, disordered individuals whose psychology is frozen at a very early stage of development are actually in positions of power. The third level of answering this question then of what a pathological society is not simply to focus on the individual leader. So at the moment, I guess by almost unavoidably, because he is stoking capturing the news and stoking everything and attracting all the attention to himself, is Trump. But it's not, a pathological society isn't only about an individual. It's about, and you could almost say it's about almost every social institution that makes up society has become pathologized. So you can think about religion, you can think about economics, you can think about politics, you can think about culture. And all of these individual social institutions have become individuals with these disorders within these institutions have become empowered. And I think you can see that quite clearly when people ask about what can we do about this, what can you do about Trump? You only have to look at this layer, that this isn't an individual, this is a pathological system. And you can see that from the fact that so many within the GOP are absolutely apologizing and enabling him, that there's a whole strand of evangelicals from a religious point of view, who are putting this false morality about that is supporting him. That the economy, you can see people coming out and saying, we can sacrifice older people because the economy is more important than human lives. And you can see it in culture in terms of racism and xenophobia. So those, I guess, just to sum up quickly in terms of the definition of pathological society, it has its basis in our early childhood development and failure in that. It has another level of individuals within institutions, and then it has this whole systemic basis, which makes it very hard to root out and to address.
Now we will move on to questions from the public. As usual, we have received numerous questions, of which we can only cover a sampling. Here's the first one. Have humans always been this pathological? And if not, why has the disorder taken over society?
I think it's always a struggle. Our hearts are an abyss, really. We are a mix of good and bad. And there are some people who are able to transcend that dichotomy and grow toward what we would say exemplary moral lives. And we know these people, we admire them and we look up to them. And then there are those who are, again, limited in their development and are not able to do that for a variety of reasons. Some of them are born that way. And it's a tragic situation when they come to power. They do come to power, however, in societies that are already disordered. So not even a healthy society, but a normal society would not allow somebody like Donald Trump into the position of the highest power in the nation, right? So the fact that this has happened is a sign that things have been very wrong for quite some time. Our societies differ in the level of development and health. And again, we can measure it by such measurements, such indices like capacity for development and happiness, educational status, attainment of creativity, pursuit of leisure. We don't have this in American society as compared with other societies in the nation. So we see the discrepancies even here and now. But there is progress. So going back to the original question, have we always been like that? I think yes. And we are growing though. We are getting better. And so believe it or not, I think this period we're going through is a period of development that's going to take us to a better place developmentally, if we navigate it properly.
The idea of progress, Elizabeth, I think this is very interesting, because the way I understand history is that we have always had pretty much a majority who are psychologically healthy. And this minority who is incapable of seeing others as equals, incapable of seeing others as anything other than a threat, who are much more prone towards violence and aggression and inequality and so forth. And to my mind, history has been one long struggle of the majority to try and reduce the malignancy of this minority. And I think if you look at through history, we can see real episodes where the majority has made huge strides in trying to contain that minority. So if you think, for example, the American Revolution was one, where a system of representative democracy, a written constitution that leaders have to abide by. After the Second World War, you can see also the human rights legislation, the sovereignty, shared sovereignty within the European Union and so forth. There have been these episodes, but they have usually come out of enormous periods of turmoil, enormous periods of violence, where this minority have really caused the disintegration of societies. So I think we're living at that kind of moment again, because it isn't just a linear progress where everything goes smoothly and we're going in one direction. We come to points like now where the presence of toxicity, the presence of a large number of empowered people with these disorders can actually, in this moment of change, can make that moment of change go in very dangerous directions. So that's where we're at right now at this historical moment. And that's why naming this pathology and trying to contain it at this moment is so important.
Karol Wojtyła became John Paul II. And now he's the Saint John Paul II. And I paraphrase that statement that history is essentially a struggle of conscience. So, and we see this so clearly. And I think we were so blind to it for such a long time. So in periods of relative stability and prosperity, we become dull, so to speak, and complacent. Everything is going well. We tend not to see the suffering that's brewing underneath the facade of our society. And then, that shadow, the dark side breaks through and the suffering cannot be contained anymore. And we see this in individual cases too, in individual development and psychotherapy, the shadow breaking through is the turning point in our individual history. And that happens typically when our suffering becomes not containable anymore. Our pain becomes so great that we're brought to our knees. And then the reality opens up and we are confronted with the truth of who we are. And the truth is both dismal and great at the same time, because we're capable of both, of evil and greatness. So when we come to this crossroads, we are faced with the choice, and I feel extremely strongly we are at this moment in history, not just in America, but all over the world. These are profound times we are living in.
Is it crazy to wonder, does Donald Trump need to be assessed by a bipartisan team of psychologists? How sad that our leaders need a mental assessment in a mentally challenged United States.
I think this is tempting, right? It's and I have struggled with this question for a while myself. So my esteemed colleague, Dr. Barkle, was interviewed in 2015 or 2016, actually, early 2016, by a British publication about the necessity of psychiatric and psychological assessment for our leaders. And I think this is an open question because on the one hand, we do psychological testing for people in all kinds of jobs, right? In the restaurant business, I've heard recently that we do psychological assessment for managers in restaurants. It's probably some basic assessment, nothing in depth, but still, we don't do this for our leaders. And the question becomes why? What basis do we use to assess the mental health of our leaders, or lack of it, as the case may be? So we rely on the wisdom of the public and on the election process to make the character of a candidate obvious. But as we see now, this is a faulty and dangerous proposition to leave this decision up to the public. alone, up to the public alone, because I absolutely don't want to discount the role of the electorate. Of course, he was elected. People like to bring up the fact that, that Hillary got more votes, right? But the fact is that he was elected and is in the position that our society lawfully gave him for a reason. So, right, and I just want to bring up one fact here. So when we marvel at the fact that this person became our leader, I think we sometimes forget the fact that he was elected not in spite of his pathology, but because of it. So he was elected because of this character problem that has made him so skilled at dismantling our institutions. So the conscious and unconscious purpose in electing a person like Trump is always that, we choose a leader like that for this purpose, to make this disorder visible and widespread. And it's a destructive purpose that has seeds of rebirth in it too.
So I think, Bandy, that it may be part of the solution. To have psychiatric assessment of leaders may be part of the solution. But I would also, in my view, I think it's a mistake to think that it's as simple as if you change the president, the problem is solved. I think it's much more deeper than that, going back to the third definition of pathological society, which is really a pathological power system. Yeah? America doesn't just have to change its president, it has to change its society. Yeah? And in one sense, that makes it a much more challenging, a much bigger challenge to address. But on the other hand, maybe it empowers a lot more people. It isn't simply about waiting until November and voting. Yeah? It's also about what kind of faith communities do you want to have? Shouldn't they be speaking out much more? What kind of economic system do you want to have? Shouldn't that be being pushed much more? What kind of cultural, what kind of culture do you want to live in? Shouldn't people be pushing much more and being more active and trying to create? So I think what's missing at the moment is joining up all of the dots about the pathology within large, very different parts of society. And the only way to defeat this is by, I can't remember who said that, that's a quote, the only way to defeat one system is to build the new one. Yeah. And I think that's exactly what's needed. And that's empowering for everyone, because everyone has a role to play in building that new system.
Next question. Without a few common media sources of information or news, like the CBS, ABC, and NBC, will we ever be able to share a common reality and common facts again?
I think absolutely, because when you say common facts, there are only facts. There aren't facts that one set of people hold on to and facts that the other set, despite what Trump and his apologists would like us to believe. There is a reality. There is a moral foundation for human beings to flourish, for human societies to function and to thrive. I think one of the systems that I didn't mention was the technological system, the social media system, the media system itself, and how pathological that is nowadays in terms of enabling all of this moral confusion and this, post-truth. Absolutely, we can get back to closing that down, recovering the truthful foundations, the scientific and moral foundations of society. Absolutely we can do it, but we can only do it, going back to my previous answer, by building a system that replaces the pathological systems that are currently in place.
I do have to agree with that. There is a way forward, and it's a hopeful way. However, we need to reevaluate now who we are and what we stand for and how we want to proceed forward. There is no return to so-called normal. The so-called normal is what brought us Trump is in the first place. So we need to start with agreeing on what our moral value systems are, the shared moral value systems are, and how we want to build a society based on those foundations.
Thank you again for this thought-provoking discussion. It's been wonderful to have you, Elizabeth, Ian. Thank you to our audience who have tuned in and to all those who contributed their questions. Thank you. Have a good evening.